Can you describe the town where you grew up?
Beloit, mostly Beloit. My earliest memories were in Naperville, Illinois. But mostly I grew up after about first grade and grew up in Beloit, Wisconsin. Describe the town?
Mm-hmm. I know you wrote a story once about it.
Well, it was a factory town. It was a paper mill town. That was the big industry. And it was right on the southern state line with Illinois. In fact, so far south in Wisconsin that South Beloit's in Illinois. It was had a factory town mentality a little bit. I went to the public school system, and that jarred a little bit with the parental influence, which was more cultured and more concerned with. My father was in the college community, private liberal arts college community, which was pretty dissociated from the rest of the town. You know, like my kids I grew up with, the neighborhood kids I grew up with, their fathers were bankers, or they worked owned Dairy Queens, or they were lawyers. One was a lawyer, and one was a banker, another was a machinist, or I think of some sort. But they were all more connected to the community in that way.
Can you talk about why you think you became a writer, and where the first notions of being a writer might have started?
Well, in the home, I suppose. You know, my mother wasn't a teacher until I was in junior high or so, or maybe, junior high school. She had trained to. She went back to school then, and my father was a teacher, and that was the sort of constants. Books. When we lived abroad, books were my my closest friends.
And do you remember something, or like the kinds of things you might have even written as a child? For example, I used to write short stories about witches.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm.
Witches. Tells a lot. In addition to being boy crazy.
I didn't know people called me boy crazy. I never knew my brother called me boy crazy, or thought of me that way. Well, he was boy crazy too.
A different way.
Yes.
I wrote, I do. I remember, it must have been in 5th grade, 4th grade, I wrote a spy story about started on a foggy street, and it had to do with world control and some evil force, evil organization with a long acronym. I remember that being the first thing I wrote.
Can you tell me about when you...
It was a foggy night in the harbor, especially so. That was the first sentence.
Oh, I love that.
It was a foggy night in the harbor, comma, especially so. 20 pages handwritten, and I remember being real proud of it.
Tell me about your brother.
My brother. Boy, that guy.
How much time is there in that tape?
Tell me about what kinds of things are do you share? Are you similar about you, and what things make you different?
Well, our sense of humor is real. I think that's probably, we share that maybe as much as anything. We share a lot of perceptions of our folks. We spend a lot of time talking about, figuring our parents out and that sort of thing. We're very close, okay? Well, he's leaving now, but we're very close. In spite of the fact that there are 8 years between us, and it took us a long time to wait around to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
But he means a lot to me.
Tell me about some place.
We talk easily. We have similar tastes and stuff.
You do?
Yeah. We have had since, for a long time, since high school age, since he was in high school, I was in college or something.
Can you tell me about, tell me 3 years specifically, let's say 1969, 1984, 3 years in your life that were somehow turning points, and what do you think, what made them so?
3 years that were turning points. I don't know. It's hard. It's a good question. It's an interesting question to think about. I remember. I have an impression of spending a lot of my life waiting for a turning point. I remember the first time I was diagnosed with cancer. People would say when you're coming out of dealing with it, with recovering and so forth, people say, well, everything's going to be different now. This is going to completely change your life. And I remember waiting for the big change to happen. You know, waking up every morning thinking, am I changed yet? You know, and I don't remember when it happened, but it happened after that. The years after that. You know, so I don't know if it was exactly 3, but at some point. I can tell, for example, I guess I can tell there were 12 years before my first incidents and this recent one. And when this recent diagnosis and prognosis happened, the recent crisis, I could tell immediately the difference between my reaction between this time and that time. And that was the clearest indication that my life had changed, or that I had changed. To me,
How had you changed, or had?
Well, the biggest thing was that I think the first time what upset me the most in recovering was the feeling that I hadn't lived yet. You know, that I hadn't really. My life was incomplete yet. I wasn't ready to go. And this time I don't have that feeling. I'm not completely, sanguine about everything, but I don't feel like I haven't had a life at this point. At that point, I sort of felt like I hadn't really had a life yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So somewhere within these 12 years, something happened. And they haven't been years of spectacular achievement or anything, but they've been years of, I guess I lived them as fully as I could, so maybe that gave me that feeling.
Mm-hmm. Those people are very noisy upstairs on the second.
One was my brother that you were asking about earlier.
So, how you have an interesting sense of community around your work and around the union, and that the lives of the people, your peers, matter to you. Can you talk about that?
Well, I guess maybe that is that's what I've got instead of the activist work or the adjunct awareness that I've been involved in the last few years. That's what we adjuncts have instead of that's what I've had instead of professional community. Instead of working with the same people and advancing within the institution along with a group, and seeing how people develop and having that particular sense of camaraderie or something. The adjunct work has taken the place of that. Meeting adjuncts, I met adjuncts from all over the country at the.
I'm just getting closer so I can hear better.
Sure.
And that's been a part of what's gone on in your life since the first
diagnosis.
Cancer,
sure, yeah.
That you've really embraced that
right,
world.
Yeah. Right.
the advocacy world and the pay equity and all of those things.
Yeah, it's not so much that I'm very good at it or terribly efficient at it or even particularly dedicated to it. There are many people who are more organized and more more efficient and get a lot more done than I do, because a lot of it's organizing and grassroots, recruiting members and urging certain votes and so on and so forth, and that kind of stuff that is not really my strong point. But it's, I guess, finding out about the issues, finding out that the issues that I've faced are common in other schools due to this hiring arrangement. Finding out that my situation isn't about me really, it's about this hiring dynamic, and it's about economics, and it's about the school's desire to save money. It's about changes in education. It's about higher education being run more and more like a business, less and less like an intellectual endeavor or a truth-seeking mission. Finding out that that's all part of a system has been gratifying.
Can you talk about writing and why writing gives you so much pleasure? Or maybe it doesn't. Sometimes it's a struggle, I'm sure.
It's always hard, but it's often hard, but it's most gratifying because it means, it's kind of pure communication that it doesn't happen elsewhere. The kind of one-on-one communication between an individual mind and another. I miss it if I don't. If I'm away from it for a while, I miss either writing or reading. I miss that kind of. It's easier for me to get diffused.
Mm-hmm.
I don't function well in groups, even on a conversation level. Function better one-on-one, and then in a party situation or 3 or 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's more like reading and writing is one-on-one communication.
And do you feel more of an affinity these days with fiction or nonfiction?
I like fiction. I always will read fiction. I always will write it. It's harder for me to write it. It takes more. There's more of an artifice to it. But I do feel more. I'm less interested in it. It's less compelling to me. It used to be. That was my primary language. That was the language that spoke to me quickest and deepest. And now partly it's because the fiction I read, maybe I've chosen to read or come across, but it seems more and more irrelevant, and it seems more and more not irrelevant, but less and less relevant. Maybe as the world gets quicker, maybe I'm just getting caught up in the online world and the fast-moving modern world. I'm just taking the easy way out a little bit, but it seems fiction used to seem to me to be to be closest to the truth. The fullest truths were through fiction. The most compelling ones, the most immediate ones, the most convincing ones. But it doesn't seem that way so much anymore.
Can you tell me what you think you have, what is in you that's from your mother and what's in you from your father?
Good question. Sense of humor from my mother, maybe? Seeds of the sense of, although my dad's got a good sense of the absurd as well. a certain way of concentrating, a certain way of focusing,
Talk a little bit
a certain way
louder.
of concentrating, a certain way of focusing, a certain myopia maybe is from him. Whatever ease I have in dealing with people is from my mother, though. Maybe. Hard to say.
And what about there? Nobody's listening now. How do you see your nieces? How would you describe your nieces?
My nieces are wonderful. They're joys. They're inspirations. I've got nothing bad to say about my nieces. Can't find anything silly. Their father once said, when he was enthusing about them at 2 and 3, said every stage is the best, and I feel that too. I see them periodically, and they always change. They've always changed considerably because I see them maybe every 6 months or every year or 8 months or whatever. And every time new delights and new things to be impressed by and new things to be charmed by.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Lynn.